Good evening and welcome. Thank you for joining us here at the Bing Concert Hall at Stanford University. I'm Brian Lowry, and I'm one of the founding faculty co-directors and senior advisor of the Stanford Institute for Advancing Just Societies. The Institute brings together scholars, practitioners, and communities to create solutions to racial and ethnic injustice, so that everyone can thrive. This has always meant public and cultural engagement and exploration that relate to this mission. So we have been thrilled to partner with Zócalo Public Square to create and produce What Can Become of Us, a series of events that combines art and conversation to help us deepen our understanding and envision new perspectives on migration. This series has taken us across 4 regions of the United States with 4 programs highlighting newly commissioned works of art to inspire a national conversation through exhibitions, public programs, and essays. I'd also like to acknowledge support for this final program from 2 campus partners, the Asian American Research Center at Stanford and the Department of Theater and Performance Studies. Now, as we reach the close of the series, tonight's program looks toward the future to ask, how do we dance with the legacy? We hope you enjoy this special performance and conversation. I'll now turn it over to Moira Shourie, Executive Director of Zócalo Public Square.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Brian. Hello. My name is Moira Shourie, and I'm the Executive Director of Zócalo Public Square, a unit of Arizona State University Media Enterprise. At Zócalo, our mission is to connect people to ideas and to each other. Everything we do is free. Everyone is welcome. We publish original writing and present conversations like this one. You can find us at zocalopublicsquare.org, on podcast platforms and YouTube. So please subscribe for our latest programs. We were founded in 2003 and are now celebrating our 23rd year. We're pleased, thank you. We're pleased to co-present this program with the Stanford Institute for Advancing Just Societies. Let me tell you about tonight's program, which is the premiere of Durga's Daughters, an original performance created and directed by Indian-American Bharatanatyam choreographer and dancer Mythili Prakash, commissioned by the Stanford Institute for Advancing Just Societies. A second-generation Indian and American artist, Mythili Prakash is trained by her mother, a renowned teacher, Vijay Prakash. Mythili has presented solo productions across the United States, Mexico, Canada, and the United Kingdom, Europe, India, and Singapore, at renowned venues including Sadler's Wells in London, the Music Academy in Chennai, Jacob's Pillow here in the United States, and the Esplanade Theatres in Singapore. She was featured as a Bharatanatyam soloist on NBC's Superstars of Dance, introducing the form to global audiences, and she appeared in Ong Lee's Life of Pi. Mythili has received grants from her work from the Irvine Dance Foundation and the Center for Cultural Innovation. And she is a 2024 United States Artists Fellow. It's an honor to present Mythili Prakash and the premiere of her new work, Durga's Daughters.
According to legend, there was a boy who was born to a buffalo. His name was Mahisha. He wished for entry into the land of the gods, but a buffalo boy was not allowed in. He performed penance and obtained a boon by which he could not be defeated by man. Now he had gained entry.
According to legend, Durga was created by the male gods. When they could not defeat Mahisha, they combined their energies to create a female warrior, her 10 arms wielding their weapons.
According to legend, these are the stories we know. That Mahisha, the buffalo boy, was a demon. That Durga, the warrior goddess, was created to kill the demon. But is that all they were?
Hello, hello. Thank y'all for having me at Poetry at the Roxy tonight. I've always come here to listen to others. Tonight's my first time performing my own stuff.
Yeah, girl. You go.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate the support. This poem here is very close to my heart. It may or may not be fictional. Okay, here goes. The story I want to write is usually a story of blood and war. But the story I'm going to tell is a story of love. Da, 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 da. But wait, it's not that kind of love story. Love is many things, you know. So in my mind, it was a story of love. They say she was born to kill. Fire of destruction filled her being. Each hand held a different weapon. Each hand held a different weapon, but those weapons weren't hers. What was hers was love. Unblemished, tender, unconditional love. She didn't see someone who was meant to be killed. She saw a being who was misunderstood, who was beautiful and kind with stars in his eyes. Someone who had been hurt and rejected, left alone. Someone who just wanted to be loved and seen. And in that, she saw herself. She wasn't a blood-devouring warrior.
She was a blood-devouring warrior.
She wasn't an agent of destruction born to vanquish.
She was an agent of destruction born to vanquish.
Yes,
she was born of fire.
She was built of fire.
She was built of fire.
But does fire not flicker?
Fire is strong.
Do you think maybe fire feels the struggle?
Fire destroys.
Between the wood that feeds it and the air that consumes
Fire
it?
consumes.
Maybe that's why fire is so dynamic.
Fire
always
is
moving,
powerful.
never still. Do you think fire is vulnerable?
Fire is powerful.
And sometimes just wants to be quenched.
Fire is not weak.
And disappear into the coolness of a water drop.
Fire is strong.
Certainly, there is such a thing as fire of passion.
Is not weak.
But could
Fire
there be
is strong.
such a thing as fire of compassion?
Fire is not weak.
So let's take a step back. Let's say she did feel passion. People think it was a passion to kill, but I know another story, and that is the story I want to tell. She was a mother of 2 daughters. Daughters born from her fire. Daughters she had to leave to fulfill her duty. What if I told you that troubled her? That she didn't want to leave them? And she didn't want to kill him.
She did want to kill him.
They say the gods sang praise. Praise of death, praise of victory.
Yes, victory over evil.
No one prays for destruction. We pray for connection. She felt connection.
She felt duty.
We pray for love. She felt love.
She felt nothing.
They say there was victory.
She
She
killed
felt
him.
sadness.
She killed
Why did he
him.
have to die?
He was
he really evil?
Pure evil.
Is there
He
such a
was
thing as evil?
He
just
was
wanted
evil.
to belong.
He did not
Could
belong.
he belong?
He was an outsider.
She cared
he
for
did
him.
not belong. She
killed him, but
he was an outsider.
what if
He
I
did not
told you
belong. She had a
that
duty.
I know
She killed
something
him.
else?
That's the story. There's nothing else.
What
That
I
is the
turned
story.
around,
That's what happened.
what I
He was
saw
an outsider. He did not belong.
when I
She had a duty.
turned
She killed him.
around
That is the story. That is
in
what happened.
that
She
moment,
killed him
what
because she
I
had a
saw
duty. He was an outsider. He did not belong.
that
That is what happened. Don't say that.
What I saw was a moment of love. Laksh, what time is it? Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. Go back to sleep.
You know, that's the third time you've done that this week. What's going on? You know, I'm a good listener.
No, I'm fine. You don't have to worry about me. Go back to sleep.
I miss you, Ma. Oh, I started something today I want to show you.
You're listening to Mother Tongue, a podcast on immigration by daughter of an alien. If you're listening to this, it probably means you are feeling the same fear and anxiety that so many of us are feeling right now. I know we all feel helpless and powerless, but I want us to remember that we are what brings color to the city of Turistra. Our cultures, our music, our foods, we make Turistra what it is. And don't you dare let them make you forget that. I won't let you. That's why I've made this secret online community. Through this website and podcast, Mother Tongue, I will share stories, songs, and poems that remind me of home. And I hope you will share yours too. Let's make art our form of rebellion, comfort, and freedom during this unimaginable time. You can write to me at iamadreamer.com. Together, we can heal.
Submissions are already coming in, Ma. I have a good feeling about this. Good night.
He set off for the long, winding road that disappeared into the crowd. After a long journey, he finally arrived at the gates of this magical land. Stop. Who do you think you are? Asked the guards. You're not allowed here. But isn't this the magical land where all wishes come true? Asked the young boy. guards laughed at him. Not for a buffalo boy like you. Not for a buffalo boy like you.
Day one of the raids has seen more than 100 people detained in one of Turistra's largest single-day immigration raids at the city center construction site. It was described as a panicked scene with law enforcement wearing face coverings and camouflage. Detainees had no criminal records and some had asylum. Some didn't have any money on them, and others were worried about the family members they'd be leaving behind. Some of those detained were handcuffed, others were zip-tied. They were led into the back of white school buses with no air conditioning on a day that was at least 86 degrees.
Good morning, kids. I am your substitute teacher for today. You can call me Miss Saras.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Lakshmi, and I'm the appointed attorney for the child on behalf of Social Services. The recording I present before you is from a deposition conducted on the 2nd of October, 11:51 a.m.
Let's see what's on your syllabus for today. Percy Jackson. Interesting. Let's do something different. How many of you have heard of Navaratri? No one? Well, in that case, I have a song for you.
This recorded deposition is in reference to the incident that took place on the 8th of August, wherein the defendant left her child alone at home for an entire night shift. I wish to enter it as evidence before the court to argue my case.
Now here is how the story is usually told. Oh, long back through the ages, in the land of Amaravati, great gods and sages lived in perfect harmony. Lakes rich as in nectar that's poured, all you could ever want to need and more.
Allow me to share with the court a recording of the defendant's statement.
Look, being a nurse in the ER isn't easy. In the blink of an eye, the hospital can turn into a complete war zone. I would have taken her that day, but she suffered from high anxiety. She had a fever, and bringing her to the hospital did not seem like a right decision. What was I supposed to do?
Born from a buffalo, Mahisha came, storming the heavens for fun and game. A demon or beast, no one knew his plan. A desire to be powerful, a god, rich man. Chaos ensued, all things awry. The citizens of heaven began to cry.
I understand that the pressures of a demanding job like being an ER nurse are difficult, Your Honor. However, I firmly believe that a mother should take the necessary precautions to bear responsibility towards her own child, no matter the circumstances. From my clinical experience, this qualifies as negligence.
Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh disturbed, joined their forces, energy stirred. There she was, rising through the flames. Goddess Durga was her name. Say it with me. Goddess Durga was her name. With loose dark hair and a gentle smile, she loved all like mother and child. Armor brilliant with gems and gold, riding a lion, her eyes bold.
I would now like to share with the court a recording of my interview with the child of the defendant.
Hi, sweetie. Just gonna ask you a few questions, okay?
Okay.
Does mommy ever leave you alone at home?
Yes, sometimes, but she always comes back.
Your Honor, the child's statement clearly also proves that this has been a pattern and was absolutely not a one-off occurrence.
Now here is the plot twist, kids. You'll never guess this. Mahisha swoons, seeing her form. You are so magical. The love he felt was strong and true. Oh, Devi, I surrender to you. I'll stop the battle, I'll end the war. You could be my wife, my life is yours, my life is yours, my life is yours. And do you know what she said to him? I wasn't made to marry you, I was made to kill you. He said, kill me if you desire. There's nothing higher I could ask for. There's nothing higher I could ask for.
I do bear responsibility. I have always taken care of my child. She's my baby. I will never do anything to hurt her.
And yet, the defendant left her alone at home for an entire night shift.
I'm telling you, please. It was one day. You have to believe me. It was one day. You have to believe me. One day. You have to believe me.
One day can change everything.
Then the sounds of war began to beat.
Work has been crazy. Everybody was
Yes, the sounds of war began to beat. It was 9 days before defeat. It was 9 days before defeat.
Your Honor, one day can change everything. A lack of consistency and care can break the trust and security felt by a child, leading to long-lasting implications on their mental well-being. One day can change everything.
So that's the end of the story, kids. But sometimes I do wonder, why did he have to die? Was he really a bad guy? Why did she have to fight? Why did he have to die?
I think I've made my case, Your Honor. For the period of the raids, I moved to place the defendant on probation. She must not have unsupervised contact with her child.
Thank you all for the beautiful entries you have sent in. You are listening to Mother Tongue, a podcast by Daughter of an Alien. Today, I want to share a special memory of mine.
தேடியனால் தன்னில் செல்வமாய் வந்தவளே தேடியனால் தன்னில் செல்வமாய் வந்தவளே வாடிய நாளெல்லாம் வருந்தி வருந்தி தவம் இருந்து தேடிய நாள் தன்னில் செல்வமாய் வந்தவளே தேடிய நாள் தன்னில் செல்வமாய் வந்தவளே மண்ணுக்கு மரம் பாரமா மரத்துக்கு கிளை பாரமா மண்ணுக்கு மரம் பாரமா மரத்துக்கு கிளை பாரமா கொடிக்கு காய் பாரமா பெற்றெடுத்த குழந்தை தாய்க்கு பாரமா
It was a bedtime story that Mother used to tell me and my sister every night. It's called Buffalo Boy. It goes like this. Once upon a time, there was a young boy who was born in the forest to a wild buffalo. She was gentle and kind, and he loved her very much. One day, she was struck by a hunter's arrow.
In her last moments, she held the boy close and said, "My darling child, dream big. There is much beyond this forest. Don't stop unless you find your magic." The young boy was heartbroken. All alone he wept until his tears formed rivers that flooded the forest. This drew all the animals who came in herds to bathe and quench their thirst. One day, the boy overheard the birds singing of a magical place in the clouds where all wishes came true. With stars in his eyes, he set off for the long winding road that disappeared into the clouds. After a long journey, he finally arrived at the gates of the magical land. "Stop! Who do you think you are?" asked the guards. "You are not allowed here." Tears filled the boy's eyes. He thought of his mom's words, "Dream big, don't stop till you find your magic." He shut his eyes and said these words again and again. When he opened his eyes, the gates were wide open. The guards stared in disbelief as the buffalo boy entered the magical land. The boy couldn't understand what he had done wrong. He ran quickly past the hands trying to capture him. The boy who was running for his life suddenly stopped as someone stood before him. He had never seen anything like her before. In her shining eyes, he saw something he never experienced. She bent down and gently whispered to him, "I'll take care of you."
In that moment,
he
realized he had found his magic. Here's hoping we all find our magic. Good night, y'all.
It is day 4 of the raids. As devotees gather in different parts of the city to celebrate the Hindu festival Navaratri, many question if all religious and cultural activities should come to a halt during this period. The festivities are expressions of faith, a time of prayer and a celebration of good over evil through the goddess Durga's triumph over the demon Mahisha, or so the legend says. While the city has always celebrated migrant culture, the question remains, are these festivities simply a trap for the raids?
It says it's supposed to be here.
Here, this is a bloody bunker.
Laksh, don't do that. You know how special this day is for us. I wanted us to do something together.
Well, I'm here, aren't I? Get on with it. This cannot be a good idea.
It'll be fine. We're just gonna stay for a bit. Have faith. Here, hold this. I need a light.
Jai Ma. Some flowers and kumkum.
Namaste to all of those who have gathered here to celebrate this auspicious occasion of Navaratri. It's a time to be careful, no doubt, but Tam Agnivarnam Tapasa Jvalantim Vairochanim Karma Phaleshu Juktaam Durgam Devim Sharanamaham Prapadye Sutarasitarase Namaha.
Cyrus, we gotta go now.
No, we just got
No,
here.
I don't care. We have to leave.
Leave where? It's safer
No, but...
in the bunker. Trust me.
Our Ma is here to protect us. Have faith in her mercy and grace. We will start with the names of Durga. Shri, auspicious. Om Shriye Namaha. Uma, Mother, Our Lady of the Mountain. Om Umaye Namaha. Bharati, Goddess of Speech. Om Bharatye Namaha. Bhadra, Great and Kind.
Do you think it's weird the way they talk about Ma?
Vani, personification of speech.
Personification of speech? Do you remember her weird songs? The vegetable singing? Spinach says, can't go wrong. Eat me, I'll make you strong. Banana says, I've got potassium. Orange, you glad I got vitamin C?
Posterity. Om Gaurye Namaha. Krodhini, extremely angry.
Okay. Some things they're getting right. Do you remember the time I hid her sword and she chased me all around the house?
I don't remember that.
Yeah. Of course you don't. You never got any tough love. Only, Saru, come sit on my lap and sing for your sister.
But you got to dance. I loved your training classes. How she'd correct every limb of yours, like you were a puppet. No daughter of mine is gonna move like a soggy chapati. Elbows up, fingers tight, diamond shape.
Okay. That was my dance class experience. And yours? Oh, Saru, you must be so tired from running around like a little monkey. Come, sit on Ma's lap and sing for your soggy chapati sisters dancing.
No wonder I loved your classes.
Yep, totally different experiences.
Can you believe it's been 26 years since we've seen her?
Lord Shiva.
Feels like a lifetime ago.
Oh, Aarti's starting.
Now, we get to everyone's favorite moment. The narrating of Durga's defeat of the demon Mahishasura. The triumph of good over evil.
Why do they always call him a demon? This whole black and white, good over evil. It's just propaganda. You know Ma wouldn't like it.
Okay. For once, can we not have your conspiracy theories? I mean, you wanted to be here, didn't you?
I think I recognize your voice from mother tongue. Am I right?
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you. My husband and I listened to that last night. It's a brilliant idea and so needed with what's going on right now. Yes.
It's the least I could do.
Yes, thank
you.
What's he talking about?
It's nothing.
What's mother tongue?
It's no big deal.
Cyrus, what's mother tongue?
Bhajans are starting.
Amma Amma Taye Akhilandeshwari Niye Annapurneshwari Taye Ho Adi Parashakti Niye Amma Amma Taye Akhilandeshwari Niye Annapurneshwari Taye Ho Adi Parashakti.
Not now. You want to join?
Laksh. Laksh. Laksh, you haven't said anything in a while. Are you feeling okay?
Am I feeling okay? No, I'm not feeling okay. Do you understand the gravity of what's happening right now?
Of course I do.
No, but do you? Like, this is insane what's happening right now. We should not have been at that puja.
No, Laksh. The government is trying to instill fear in us like this. As if we don't deserve to be here.
Technically, we don't. Saras, we are not like the other people. We are not even from this world. Have you even thought for 1 second what would happen if we got caught? We've been lucky beyond belief that we've been blessed with these jobs and these lives through God. I don't even know what.
Grace. Laksh, through grace. Sometimes I feel you forget who we are. We're not ordinary. There's a power that protects us. Ma brought us here to protect us. We're not gonna get caught. You have to have belief.
This is what worries me. Sir, we live here now, on earth, in Turisha, and we have to play by these rules. I can't win my court cases through the power that protects us. I have to work and do all the normal human things and use my normal human brain. And who do you think is paying the bills? Huh? Belief. It can't be my job to protect you forever until you find your calling.
Laksh, don't throw that in my face. I never told you to take care of me.
Then what? Huh? What will you do? You'll apply for a loan. What papers will you show? Oh, I'm Saraswati, documentation, I don't have that. You see, I'm the daughter of goddess Durga. Did I come on a boat? No, I came through a blip in time. You see, in the mythical world, there is no documentation. It's belief. I can't show it to you in writing. You simply have to believe it. Get a grip, man.
Okay, so what you're saying is I should move out and get a serious job.
No,
okay.
This is turning into something else. I just want you to pay attention to the reality of the moment. And what is this mother tongue that guy was talking about? Saras, you can't be hiding things from me.
It's an anonymous website. Good. The way the government is making us feel is unfair. People need to feel comfort and community. You know how healing art is. Why do you think Ma taught us music and dance and stories? So that's what I can do. And it's become my purpose.
So what do?
I post stories, and I encourage other people to do so. Childhood stories, memories, their journey coming here, songs, it's anything really. It's just meant to be a place where people can be free without anxiety.
And what happens if they trace your IP address and you get caught?
Laksh, if we live in that kind of fear, we're screwed. We're paralyzed. Seriously, how can we live like that? Somewhere you have to believe that we are not ordinary.
I can't, just this conversation's high my anxiety. Look, it's a 9-day raid. Please, just lay low. Saras, we are the people being hunted. We are dreamers. And dreamers not like you making up wild stories, but dreamers as in undocumented. And undocumented beyond the point of belief. Even those Durga devotees, you think they'd believe us? You say, hey, we're the daughters of goddess Durga, and she sent us here to earth when she was in battle to protect us. Saras, we exist so beyond the realm of reality that I need you to see how desperate this situation is.
I do see how desperate it is, and I'm trying my best to play a part in the healing. Didn't you hear what that man said, that hearing my podcast helped him and his husband? Laksh, don't forget the truth.
What? Truth? What? Truth? You keep talking about the truth as though it's some big thing you know, but you were 4 years old. You don't remember anything. You have never had to do anything ever. I was the one taking care of you. I am always the one taking care of us. I was the one she told to look after you, to not leave that cave. And if you hadn't rushed out on the battlefield on the 9th day crying for her, we might not even be in this situation. If not for you, we might have still been with her. If not for you, we might... I didn't mean that.
No, you did. It's pretty clear. You won't tell me anything you remember. Ma passed all the responsibility to you, and I'm the wafty one, making up stories. I'm just trying to remember her. How she felt, how I felt, where we come from.
I'm just trying to remember too. Or maybe I'm trying not to remember, I don't know.
Let's just leave it for tonight.
Laksh.
What?
Let's just leave it for tonight. Laksh. You always say my name. It feels weird when you don't.
Yeah. Good night, Laksh.
Good night, Saras.
always comes back.
She's my baby, and I will never do anything to hurt her. She's my baby, and I will never do anything to hurt her. She's my baby.
But she always comes back.
Turistry Bureau of Immigration has increased security measures. Effectively, there is a city-mandated curfew, whereby anyone on the streets after 8 p.m. will be approached for documentation and incarcerated if unable to provide proof of citizenship. These mandates, targeting people taking public transport or traveling on foot, seem to be aimed at the working class in the hopes of identifying undocumented immigrants.
I'm worried about her, Ma. I don't know what goes inside of her head. She's so closed off. It's hard enough to navigate in this world, being who we are. I wish she would open up to me. She gets mad at me when I talk about the truth.
What is the truth, Ma? Saras keeps saying the truth and I get so mad because is there something I'm missing? Is there something you reveal to her that you never revealed to me?
I saw you, Ma. I know I was little, but I saw you. Your shades, your shadows, your colors, all of it. Is it that you showed yourself to me in a way that you didn't show to her?
I've always thought life was governed by duty. That my feet weren't meant to leave the ground, but to make sure that she was anchored safely.
You let me fly, Ma. You let me be free. But why didn't you teach me like you taught her? Am I not worthy?
I try, Ma. I try to be strong, to be correct, to not be weak, to be like you. But sometimes I see her and I just want to be free too. Sometimes I see her and I just...
Why didn't you teach me like you taught her? Did you not believe in me? Sometimes I just wish I was enough.
Once upon a time, there was a young boy who was born in the forest to a wild mother buffalo. She was gentle and kind. One day, Mother was struck by a hunter's arrow. In her last moments, she held her boy close. There is much beyond this forest. Do not stop until you find your magic. The young boy buffalo was heartbroken. One day, the young boy overheard the birds singing of a magical place in the clouds where all wishes came true. With stars in his eyes, he set off for the long, winding road that disappeared into the clouds. After a long journey, he finally arrived at the gates of this magical land. Stop. Who do you think you are? Asked the guards. You're not allowed here. Guards laughed at him. Not for a buffalo boy like you.
The issuance of visas because it's considered a sanctuary city, and that's one of their chants we've been hearing since Friday.
Tears fill the boy's eyes.
After federal agents conducted an immigration operation.
I just wish people could see
The group calling for
that I'm a child too.
saying that they
He thought of his mother's words.
That a large-scale federal immigration operation was carried out. No one was arrested that day, but the images of military vehicles, officers on horseback,
Do not stop until you find your He shut his eyes and said these words again and again and again. When he opened his eyes, the gates were wide open. The guards stared in disbelief and fear as the buffalo boy entered their magical land. They ran after him, shouting, catch him, he doesn't belong here." Chaos ensued in this magical land. The buffalo boy will destroy everything. Get him out. Call her, only she can catch him.
Impenetrable, physical, tall, powerful, beautiful, physical, tall, powerful, beautiful, physical, tall, powerful, beautiful, impenetrable, physical, tall, powerful, beautiful. I am going to create a new special beautification identify beautiful and quickly removing the most dangerous criminal illegal immigrants in America who have evaded justice. Beautiful, physical, tall, powerful, beautiful, physical, tall, powerful.
Stop! What was that? You felt what? What does that mean?
I think I know.
You think you know what? Laksh, I'm scared.
We were scared. We didn't know what was happening to her.
Are you talking about what happened that
That night, we were scared. We didn't know what was happening to her.
Laksh, there's been something you've been holding on to this whole time, and it's been eating at me.
At me too, Saras. Like something that wants to come out, but it can't. I won't let it.
Why won't you?
I'm too scared.
What are you scared of?
Everything.
I don't understand.
Look, you're right. We're not ordinary. We're the children of Goddess Durga, for God's sake. We were there, on that battlefield, the one in the scriptures, the one that sung and danced about. We grew up in that cave under Amravati. How is any of that normal?
Then let's talk about it. That's all I've ever wanted. Please.
What do you remember?
I remember playing ball and how Ma had told us not to go into that part of the cave after sundown, ever. But that night, the ball rolled in there, and I saw you run after it and freeze like a statue. And I heard it. The language you were just speaking. Ma was speaking it too, in a tone of voice that we had never heard before. But I don't remember if I saw anything. Do you?
Maybe it's what you just saw.
You look like something was passing through you, like you were possessed. And the sounds coming out of your mouth were coming from elsewhere.
Yeah, that's what it was. I think male voices filled me with something, syllables, instructions, commands. I could feel weapons flying into my hands. I could hear their orders. Kill him, destroy him, repeating over and over.
Did that scare you?
No. What scares me is that it didn't scare me.
Then?
I don't know, I didn't feel scared or empowered or excited to kill him or destroy him or whatever. I felt a deep sadness for someone I once loved deeply, and as though this thing they were willing me to do was the last thing on earth I wanted to do.
Laksh, do you hear what you're saying?
I don't even know what I'm saying. I don't know what to think.
Did I ever tell you what I saw that night?
I thought you didn't see anything.
Later that night, I couldn't sleep. Ma wasn't laying with us. I saw a light shining. She was bent over drawing something, humming a tune that hasn't left my ears. When I came close, I saw the shape of her face in the light, and a tear slid down her cheek, landing with a little splat on her drawing. I had never, ever seen Ma cry, but it didn't make me feel weird. It made me feel, I don't know, soft inside. I wrapped my arms around her and she held them back as if she was letting me console her, as if she needed that hug.
How come you've never told me this?
Laksh, seriously?
Did you see what she was drawing?
I don't know if I saw, but I feel I know. I see it in my mind's eye. And maybe that's what my poem is about. My wafty, wafty poem.
Gosh, Saras, I don't even know what to say.
This is more than we have ever said.
I know, in so many ways I've blocked it out. I've needed to. Just that image of you as a 4-year-old sobbing during those 9 long nights in the cave, it's never left me, and I guess it manifests in this.
I guess I never really thought about that. Actually, you took care of us. You bathed me, you fed me when you were 8. Gosh.
Yeah, it's so surreal. Sometimes I wonder if it even happened, and I guess not thinking about it and avoiding it has allowed me not to confront the one thing that's hardest for me.
What's that? Laksh, just say it.
Why didn't she come for us?
Maybe she has, in her own way. It's probably just another submission.
It's okay, you can get it.
Oh my God.
What is it?
It's an SOS from the bunker.
Wait, what do you mean?
Hang on. God.
People went for the 9th-day puja before hearing about the government mandate, and they're not going to make it back on time for curfew.
Wow, I never thought of the website as being a sort of hotline.
Yeah, what do? They're asking for supplies to stay the night. Water bottles, sleeping mats, chargers. What else would they need? Medicine. Wait, what time is it? We're not gonna make it. Wait, what are you doing?
Of course we're gonna make it.
What?
Look, Saras, I don't know if I understand the truth or not, but for the first time I feel it. There's a knowing that Ma brought us here to discover who we are. To know that human and divine aren't separate, and beyond that, I don't know how to put it into words, but I get it. I'm on board.
Wait.
Yeah. Whatever madness you're up to, I get it. I'm on board.
So you're not worried we're gonna get caught?
Well, you gotta have belief, right? Okay, we only have an hour, let's go.
Lakshmi and Saraswati's stories there. Where they continue is within us. After all, aren't we all Durga's daughters? Carrying the baggage of our past, our traditions and legacies, and trying to make sense of how they sit within us today. Aren't we both human and divine, seeking the inner abundance that does not run in the same currency of this outer world? Struggling to find balance between action and surrender, between magic and science, between machine and spirit. More and more, we believe what we see, but somewhere we also see what we believe. And that's what makes all these stories we tell. Belief. There is no one truth, no one story. That is why this is the story that I want to tell.
All right, everybody, take your seats again. We're going to roll right into the next portion of the program. This is going to be a wonderful compliment to what you all just saw. Really proud of Mythili's work. Everything you saw here tonight was originally recorded and an original dance performance, so that's just pretty phenomenal. Mythili, thank you so much for your incredible performance, and it's now time for us to move into the panel conversation. And now I'm going to introduce our panel's moderator. Tomás Jiménez is a professor of sociology here at Stanford and the founding co-director of Stanford's Institute for Advancing Just Societies. His research and writing focus on immigration, policy, integration, social mobility, and ethnic and racial identity. Over to you, Tomás.
Can you hear me now? There we go. Thank you, Moira. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. It is my pleasure to now introduce our three panelists. Ahmed Badr is an Iraqi-American author, professor, and social entrepreneur. His work builds infrastructure enabling young people to transform lived experience into organizations, ventures, and movements. He is director of the Patricelli Center for Entrepreneurship and assistant professor of the practice in public policy at Wesleyan University. Ahmed is author of While the Earth Sleeps, We Travel, and he's also founder of Narratio, which runs signature fellowship programs for resettled refugee youth in partnership with the Metropolitan Museum of Art. His work sits at the intersection of storytelling, migration, and venture creation, reaching millions worldwide through collaborations with National Geographic, the World Bank, and the Nobel Prize Museum, among others. Please join me in welcoming Ahmed. Julian Brave NoiseCat is a writer and filmmaker. His documentary, Sugarcane, directed with Emily Cassie, premiered at the Sundance Film Festival, where it won the Directing Award in the U.S. documentary competition. The film has been recognized with dozens of awards, including Best Documentary from the National Board of Review. It was also nominated for an Academy Award. A member of the Canham Lake Band, NoiseCat's first book, We Survive the Night, is a national bestseller and was published by Alfred Knopf, Penguin Random House Canada, and Profile Books. Please join me in welcoming Julian. Dr. Janina Jeff Ringo is a population geneticist, educator, motivational speaker, STEAM advocate, and award-winning podcaster. She made history as the first African-American woman to earn a PhD in human genetics at Vanderbilt University, and she's a proud graduate of Spelman College. Her work explores the intersection of genetics and identity and social justice, with a particular focus on the lived experience of people of African descent. She's the host and executive producer of In Those Genes, a podcast that uses genetics to decode the lost histories of African-descended Americans through the lens of Black culture. In Those Genes has been recognized by the American Society of Human Genetics, the NY Festivals, IndieWire, the New York Times, Third Coast Audio Festival, and the Ambies. Please welcome Janina. So for those of you who are here with us, we'll be taking some questions after our conversation. If you're joining us in our live feed on YouTube, there's a chat function where you can put your questions in, and we'll get to as many of those questions as we can when we finish. I, in many ways, want to pick up where the performance left off, and with a preface. So we're going to be talking somewhat interchangeably about legacy and storytelling, and I think of storytelling as a way of curating, of passing along, potentially suppressing legacy. So with that preface, I want to get into it, and Julian, I want to throw this first question at you. When I think of legacy, I think of inheritance, and we all inherit various kinds of legacies because of when we were born, the circumstances we were born into, where we were born. And so to pick up the question that animates our panel, how do we dance with the legacies that we inherit, Julian?
Well, firstly, thank you all so much for sticking around. It's quite a tough act to follow, no? I mean, that was remarkable. I myself am a dancer. I'm no Mythili Prakash, just to be clear. But I have spent my life on the powwow circuit, so other kind of Indian, not South Asian, the ones from this continent. And actually driving onto the Stanford campus this afternoon reminded me of my days on the powwow trail. I still get to dance a bit, but I have other preoccupations like writing and filmmaking and making a living. But for a big part of my life, traveling the powwow circuit, which is a big part of indigenous life in North America. It's basically type of gathering of song and dance. Some of them are competitive, and in fact, the largest one in Northern California is held on this campus at Stanford on Mother's Day weekend. A number of you are nodding your heads because you know what I'm talking about. And that was a big gathering in the community that I grew up in, because I also grew up across the bay in Oakland, California. And the reason that I became a powwow dancer is actually, I think, kind of gets at the question that you're asking. I grew up in a household where I was a child of two different worlds. My dad was, this is kind of a contradiction in terms, but my dad was a famous Indian artist, to the extent that there is such things as famous Indian artists, because Indian artists don't usually get to be famous. But I remember when he was pictured on the cover of Native People's magazine with a backwards Kangol hat and purple rock star shades. Like he truly was a character. And my mom's an Irish-Jewish New Yorker, so when she talks, you can really hear it. And my dad, he left when I was young, and so I was raised by my white mom. And for those who can't see, who are visually impaired, I'm a brown man with long hair, and also they put about as Indian a name as you could on a kid, Julian Brave NoiseCat. Nobody read that at school attendance, and it was like, "What's your ethnic background?" So, there I was with a white mom in Oakland, California, and a dad who was in the wind. And a big way that I connected with my indigeneity, with my heritage, was I went to powwow drum and dance practice at the Intertribal Friendship House in Oakland, California on International Boulevard. It's the third oldest urban Indian community center in the United States. People don't know that, but actually the Bay Area has been home to urban natives for a long time because there was a federal relocation program. And so, the way that I was able to remain connected to my identity was through dancing. And what's interesting about the dances that I do is that they originate with the dances of the hunt and the war. And so essentially they are storytelling dances as well. And so essentially through dance, we are on the powwow circuit, following in the footsteps of our ancestors. That is kind of quite literally what the conception is. And of course, for all of us as Native people, myself included, it's not exactly the easiest thing to follow in the footsteps of ancestors. There were purposeful attempts to make that impossible, to make it illegal, and to kill off those very songs and dances and ways of being. And yet, so often, what's so interesting about the history of indigenous peoples in this country is that our political resurgence, the movement for self-determination, coincided with our cultural resurgence. And so often when we were reclaiming our rights as sovereign nations, we were also reclaiming our songs and dances. It's almost as though those two things are connected.
Ahmed or Janina, how do you dance with a legacy?
Yeah, for me, storytelling is tied to place and lack of permanence in a place. My family came to the U.S. as refugees in 2008 via Syria, but we're from Iraq. And storytelling was something that was always the thing that we carried with us from place to place. And we went from Baghdad to Aleppo to the coast of Syria to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, which is uncommon route, and a bad weather decision. And then now home isn't in Houston, Texas, and I'm in New England. But when I think about legacy, I think about the space between place, memory, and people, and the relationship between those three over time. And for us, going from kind of place to place, our story of being from Iraq and having kind of the very, very rich tradition around poetry and around history was always present, at the dinner table and beyond. And starting in high school, I started to ask myself this question of, as a young person, as this Iraqi-American Muslim refugee, which sounds like an oxymoron in multiple ways, what does it mean to share our own stories on our own terms? And that started to wrestle with that question, and it started with sharing my own story and realizing that I could, one, share it, that there were people that were willing to listen to it, and then realize that I was quickly becoming this go-to inspiring refugee at the UN and other places, and it's a privilege to do that to a point. But I wasn't interested in that anymore. And so for me, storytelling is agency, and storytelling is the kind of agency that you can exercise that inspires other people to take control of their own ability to share their own stories on their own terms.
Yes, so my story is very different. I'm from New Orleans, Louisiana, and when I think about dancing with legacy, I think about the legacy of my ancestors who I've had the privilege of getting to know. I'm very fortunate to have met all 8 of my great-grandparents. And a part of that is hearing the stories that they told me growing up, and then learning as I got older all of the stories they didn't tell me as I grew up. And then becoming at the intersection of science, trying to disentangle, what was told to me versus what science says. And so it was this complex relationship of trying to appreciate the things that were told to me through storytelling, but also to try to understand more so the stories that weren't told to me. And as I got older, starting to think about why certain parts of our legacy were not told. So to give some examples, I'm very, very, very fortunate to be the third generation graduate, third generation college graduate and graduate studies, which is very unusual for a Black American family in segregated New Orleans. And I was always told a lot about that legacy, a lot about the academic legacy. And when I reflect on my ancestors, I realized that I was told this because education was a gateway. Education was proximity to white supremacy and thus proximity to survival. But I wasn't told the stories of how my great-grandfather was severely underpaid, although he was a director of a city campaign, or how my grandfather, who got a PhD, almost didn't get a PhD because of hurdles that were not under his control. Those were the stories I were not told, but those were the stories through my own experience that I learned about and began to appreciate long after those ancestors were gone. So when I think about how I am, dancing with legacy, it's always kind of this twofold of really thinking about the beauty and the mindset and consciousness of my ancestors, and appreciating both the good and the bad, which maybe wasn't told to me to protect me. So
Yeah, let's stick with that point. So each of you have talked about some version of leaving parts of a legacy buried and unearthing other parts. And Ahmed, you mentioned agency. So Janina, I want to kind of ask you an agency question. How do we decide which parts of a legacy to leave buried and which to unearth, especially when some of the often buried parts are painful, they're full of shame, they're full of sorrow? How do you make that decision?
Yeah, I think it's a very personal decision. I talk a lot about this. I'm a geneticist, and I have never taken a commercial genetic ancestry test, and that is intentional. And one of the reasons being is because I know that my genome can tell me a painful story that I may not want to confront, a painful story that may not add value to how I identify myself. And while I know the truth behind some of the painful past, it's a personal decision on how I choose to engage in it. And being someone who speaks about genetics often, and particularly the intersection of genetics and race, I feel like I come from a big place of privilege when I reflect on my ancestors, for example, who did not talk about these things. So I think it's a privilege to, one, know about them, but also to be able to talk about them and not be re-victimized and so forth. So I've made some conscious decisions on things I want to know, things I don't want to know. And I think my deciding factor at least, is can I benefit from knowing? And if there isn't a benefit from knowing for me personally, I choose not to engage, even though, I know about it.
Julian, Ahmed, you could have jumped in?
Yeah, I think the piece about is it a burden to share and then is it a burden to find out is really interesting to me. And I think especially my own parents, they were civil engineers in Baghdad for decades and then came here and kind of went back to school and started all over again. And I was the first person in my family to be public about our story of displacement. And in the house, we'd never really talked about it. It was like, okay, this is life, and we do this, and then we do that, and then it is what it is. And in 2017, I did a podcast for the UN on migration across the US, and I interviewed my parents for the first time, and my younger sister. And it was the first time that we spoke to each other in English for an extended period of time. English is not allowed in the house, just Arabic, which I'm really grateful for. And we talked about the journey of coming to the US and kind of what happened that initially caused us to leave our home in Baghdad was bombed. I wasn't home, my parents were, my sister were, and everybody survived, thankfully. And to hear both my dad's kind of recollection and my mom's recollection and my sister's, who, my sister was 3 years old, so, she didn't remember too much, was really powerful, it was really emotional. But that was a very small part of the conversation. The conversation was, a lot of it was about what it was like for my parents when they graduated with civil engineering degrees and couldn't find jobs in the US to work at Walmart and Home Depot and still come home and smile and be happy. And I've always wanted to ask them, like, how do you do that? How do you do a 8-hour, 9-hour shift to come home and be okay? And they talked about that for the first time. And it wasn't because they weren't hiding that. It just was, resilience was more important than laying it all out. So there is a time and place, I think, for everything. But there's also, I think, power for things to remain buried. And it's not a clear, lay it all out or don't.
Yeah, the question of agency is a really interesting one. And, I think that as humans, we often assume that we are the primary agents of why stories come forward and why certain events unfold. And what was really interesting to me about Mythili's piece was that it was in part talking about forces greater than ourselves and their agency, perhaps the supernatural, the divine. And the reason I bring that up is that that's something that I think a lot about in my work. Sugarcane is a documentary about a system of religious colonization that was continent and global in scale. And what's interesting about that story is that I actually did not choose, like, it was not because I was like, I want to document this history that story came together. Actually what happened, and this is part of, response to the question, was that my co-director, after the discovery of 215 potential unmarked graves at a school in Kamloops, British Columbia, Emily Cassie, she reached out to me and asked me if I'd be open to collaborating with her on a documentary. And, long story short, I knew that this was a heavy story for my family. I'd never worked in documentary before. I had to think about it. So she went out and found a First Nation that was going to begin its own investigation and secured access, packed bags, got tickets. 2 weeks later, when I got back to her and said, hey, about that documentary, I think I'd be open to collaborating with you, that's when she told me that the First Nation that she'd secured access to follow was the Williams Lake First Nation, and that they were beginning an investigation at St. Joseph's Mission, which was completely flooring to me, because that was the moment when I told her that's the school that my family was taken away to, and where, to the best of my knowledge, at the time my father was born. So just to press the point, Emily happened to choose the one school out of 139 across Canada that my family was taken away to and where my father was born, to focus our documentary on, not knowing that that was my connection to the story. So I think sometimes, it's worth asking, what are the agencies beyond ourselves, and what kinds of storytelling traditions, usually non-Western, non-secular ones, get at those kinds of truths in our lives.
Yeah, no, let's press on this a little bit. So Janina and Ahmed, you both talked about, burying or unearthing kind of family legacy. Julian, you've kind of brought us into talking more about a story of a collective. And I wonder if the question, or if you'd answer the question differently if we think about it in a different register. So we can think about burying or unearthing family stories, and we might think of that in some ways as an individual decision. But what about when it's a collective legacy? What about when it's the legacy of a group, be that a tribe, an ethnic group, a nation? And here I'm thinking about the placards that were outside of George Washington's home until a few months ago that told the story of George Washington having been a slave owner, in addition to all of the other things that George Washington did. And so there's been an effort to kind of bury that legacy because it's a painful part of our history. Those placards are back up. But how do we think about this as a collective legacy and the kind of burying and unearthing question? Feel free to jump in, anyone.
I mean, when I think about it as a collective, and I think about this in so many different aspects, I really think this is why I give my hats off to creators and communicators, because there is a way of doing this to bring shared value within a community. And so when I think about this, I'm thinking, how can the next generation benefit from knowing this? And in my own family, there were certain things that were taught to me that I didn't realize was a part of that communal, sharing of information that wasn't, I wouldn't say as straightforward, so I didn't know it was shameful then, but there was an education of survival and things like that is community-wide. So I feel like when we think about this, we really have to think carefully about how we communicate these stories. And there is a way, and we do this on the show, of communicating and sharing painful past in light. So it doesn't have to be traumatic. There were several years in media where we saw all these slave stories, and most people in my community were like, we're not, during the uprising and the help, and it was just a lot. But I think that there is a way in which we can share the story of our lives that also share the story of the time. That doesn't have to be traumatic. That doesn't have to be something that we need to protect our children from. It's something that we should be sharing with them. And the more that we become transparent with them and teach them about the world, how it was and how it should be, then I think the better we make the entire community.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, I think there's the the invitation to share a story is just as important oftentimes as the story that's told and how that invitation is made. We run this fellowship program for resettled refugee youth, and the first thing we always start with is that you're not here to share your displacement story. If that's something you want to do, welcome, but here are a list of kind of opportunities and exercises. And the central exercise for the past 8 years for all 90 fellows has been pick an object from this museum and rewrite the label of the object as a poem according to your own history and experience. And then you will perform that in the galleries at the end of the month intensive. And there are very clear issues with encyclopedic museums and others that are, I could spend the whole panel talking about, but with the exercise, it's much more about here is a question that you yourself get to answer in whichever way you would like to. And for some folks, they do talk about the displacement story, and for some folks, it doesn't appear at all. It's more about memory and the memories they want to hold on to. So I think to answer your question, it's about the infrastructure that is activating those stories and the infrastructure that is sustaining them over time. And so part of it is logistics of like, how do you access these stories over time? If it is a placard that's removed, are there other ways that that story could still be told? And also, that story is one that's been told for hundreds of years. And so it's not as easy as just taking out a placard and assuming people are like, oh, wow, this guy actually was great. That's not how it works. So it's short-sighted to just take them out because it's not going to make that much of a difference. And so I think it's about the infrastructure that those stories are being delivered through as well.
Yeah, as a Native person, I think I'm very interested not just in collective remembering, but collective forgetting. And, one of the things that I thought a lot about in especially the directing of Sugarcane, but also in the writing of We Survived the Night, is the way that the memory of these schools, existed literally, physically all across Canada, all across the United States. There were 139 schools across Canada, 417, 3 times as many here in the United States, and touched many different organs and arms of society. In Canada, it was the law enforcement, the RCMP, that enforced the mandatory attendance at these schools. They'd go pick up the kids. My grandmother, my kia, was picked up on the back of a cattle truck and taken to the school. They were administered by the churches, by the Catholic Church, some of the biggest institutions in the entire world. They received credit from banks. There were documentaries, some archival footage of which we included in the film, that aired on the CBC, the national broadcaster. So at a certain point, when people said things, non-Native people said things like, we had no idea, I kind of struggle with that one, because I'm like, well, in our film, there's an advertisement that played on televisions across the country to adopt Indian and Métis children. There was an ad on your TV where you could go adopt one of these kids, this was a national system that your church was involved in, your bank was loaning to it, At the same time, though, what's interesting about forgetting, I think particularly in racialized and colonial context when there's a lot of trauma involved, is that forgetting can also be a collective strategy for survival. And for my family, what was really interesting about this history and this story was that it was one that we did not talk about. My father was actually born at St. Joseph's Mission, the school that my family was sent to, and found in the trash incinerator in circumstances that were significant enough that they were reported in the local newspaper. And yet this was a story that he himself did not know and that our family never talked about, and didn't talk about what happened at the schools writ large. So there are ways in which that collective act of amnesia can also be internalized by the very people who survived the injustice, which I think is a really interesting thing, and I think points to the truth in some of the moves that many post-colonial theorists have made about the way that colonization ends up becoming internalized by the colonized subject.
Let's stick with the collective for a second. So each of you, and Mythili as well, are telling stories of people who are often hidden. They're some of the most vulnerable people historically and in the here and now. And in doing so, you're answering a call for inclusion. And I want us to kind of consider for a second inclusion into what? So we can think of the stories that you tell or that you facilitate people telling as kind of individual threads. And they're threads to be appreciated on their own, and they should stand on their own, especially because these are often people who have been forgotten. We can also think of those threads as part of a larger tapestry, woven into a larger fabric that tells the story of a larger collective, be it a tribe, an ethnic group, a nation, et cetera. And so I'm wondering, in your own work, and Ahmed, I'll throw this question at you, how do you think about, and I don't think these things are necessarily mutually exclusive, but how do you think about the individual thread as kind of standing on its own versus it being woven into a larger fabric?
Yeah, America loves a hero and like the story of a hero, and maybe the world writ large, but I think here in the US especially. And for me, and I mentioned earlier, kind of somewhat jokingly, like becoming the like go-to inspiring refugee person was very convenient for a lot of the organizations that were making those invitations. And there's an infrastructure in the US, especially for young, like the young change maker industrial complex. It's real, it's like a thing. And it's, there are parts of it that are positive, parts of it that are not. But oftentimes, you know, and I grew up alongside this and still growing up alongside it, is that folks attach themselves to movements and organizations for the wrong reasons. And their stories become intertwined with these larger narratives, and institutions of influence get to pick that person because they have gotten all the opportunities over and over again, so they're the greatest speaker or the best speaker. And the collectives that they represent aren't always represented in those talks and those panels and those engagements. And so for me, it was realizing that that was starting to happen and trying to offer an alternative infrastructure for how the stories of displaced young people are told and how they're elevated among kind of institutions that oftentimes are determining the narrative around immigration and the stories of refugees. And so for us, it was, let's create this collective group of young people that are trained to share their own stories on their own terms. And at the very hyper-local level, we work in Syracuse, New York, and in Virginia, and then link that hyper-local work to major institutions like the Met and the Nobel Prize Museum and others, in hopes of not like changing the narrative around how these stories are told necessarily. If that happens, great, but forcing those institutions to think twice about tokenizing those folks over time. And so when I think about that tension between the individual and the collective, I think it's more convenient and it's easier, and it oftentimes can be more powerful to elevate the individual. But I think it's even more powerful to elevate the individual that always is aware of the collectives that made their story possible.
Janina, go for it.
Yeah, no, very similar. We share very similar work. On our show and having a podcast, whenever you produce a podcast, everyone is always, and you'll get a lot of emails like, hey, can I be on your show? And then we get, producers are like, hey, you need to like try to book, the Henrietta Lacks family or like these really prominent, famous people. And to your point, I have learned in my own experience of consuming media, but also in creating it, that a lot of those stories don't represent the collective. And so for our show, we have focused on telling stories of people that we know or people that we've heard of. We have a story of a then 96-year-old Guyanese woman who lived her whole life in Brooklyn, and through the story of her life, which she knew nothing about genetics or biology, we also tell the story of aging, biologically aging. And so there is this opportunity to hear her story and humanize her as a person while also learning about science and how those two things come together. And so I felt like I was very proud of that. It felt like we were showcasing a a collective shared experience, Black lived experience that wasn't traumatic, that wasn't, sad, but was just joyful. But we've also, on the flip side of that, have told stories of young people who have gone through very traumatic events. And so we have been trying to figure out how do we represent the collective, but in short, we have found you do that by just talking to people. And some of our guests have never been on the podcast or never spoken publicly, and that also shares light to just how we are as humans. Some of us are better speakers than others, but our stories are not any less important.
I feel like I come from a tradition that's really skeptical of inclusion. Inclusion is kind of the nice way of saying assimilation, at least from an indigenous perspective. And, I think it's worth just pointing out for a moment here that there are over 500 federally recognized tribes here in the United States, over 600 in Canada. If you combine the two countries, it's over 1,200 distinct governments, tribes, First Nations, recognized by the national governments of these countries, and there used to be a lot more. And, our aspiration is not one of inclusion within the body politic. It's not to be part of the expanding story of citizenship and civil rights. Not to say that that's a bad story, but our aspiration is one of reclamation of our right to self-determine, of our land, our culture, our governance systems, which, quite frankly, this country is about to celebrate its 250th, birthday. It's a lot older than 250 years, that our people have been around. And so we are trying, I think, through narrative and through movement and all these other things, to take those things back. And I think from my perspective as a storyteller, my question is often, how can my work be part of that? And what does that look like, creatively and artistically in the way that I approach the stories I tell? So the book that I wrote, for example, We Survived the Night, it's a nonfiction book, but it's done in the style and tradition of the coyote story, which is, an oral tradition from my own people that has nearly died out, but that is also one of the most significant oral traditions in the history of humanity writ large.
Julian, let's stick with you, and I want to kind of flip the perspective around a little bit. So when we hear a story, be it told through dance or film or a podcast or through art, we as an audience share an experience, and the art or the film or the podcast, et cetera, are part of that experience, and in some ways we become co-owners of that experience. I mean, that's some of the beauty of art. All of us here got to share the experience of Mythili and her colleagues' incredible performance, but that sharing to me implies some ownership, and ownership comes with responsibility. So I wonder if we can think about, as an audience, all of you are producers of stories and narrative, but let's think about the audience a little bit. What's our responsibility once we've heard the story, witnessed the story?
You brought up the performance, and so I'll go back to the performance tradition that I'm a part of, the powwow. Part of what's interesting about the powwow is that it comes from older dance societies of the hunt and the war, but that it was actually modernized and spread through the Buffalo Bill Wild West show, which gave Native people the opportunity to continue to participate in our culture, but for a very different kind of venue. These were audiences who came to watch, the cowboys and the Indians square off again in sort of a, staged type performance. And so I think it's it's interesting for me to think about the ways that, the intention of the people who might be putting on a performance, who might be dancing, singing, et cetera, are often quite different in, disparate power relationships from the audience that has come to consume that thing. And yet, that very unequal circumstance can also still be a way in which you can Trojan horse your culture and the things that you want to survive into the future, which I think is something that indigenous peoples across many different contexts have done in numerous ways, the Wild West show being one example.
Yeah, I was just going to say from my own experience in developing the podcast, we at one point were working with Spotify, and I was told that we needed to explain certain cultural things that we talk about on the podcast, and my producers and I were like, no, we're not here to explain. I think what it brought to light to me that even being an audience member, sometimes when you are taking in a story, there is an urge to want to understand what the performer's view and perspective is. And it was for the first time that I realized as a consumer of art, I have never appreciated the freedom in developing my own personal view and experience of it and my own take of the story. And so through that experience, I feel like as an audience member, especially when you're engaging with art that you may not be familiar with, that may not be a part of your culture, it's a really, 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 it's a place of privilege to be able to witness it, but it's also a place of privilege to be able to interpret it on your own terms, and then a place of opportunity to be able to learn from the performance and dig a little bit deeper. And I don't know, after tonight, I'm truly inspired.
Yeah, I think the audience question is one we're wrestling with now. I think for the last decade or so, we've been focusing on activating these leaders and their stories. And they've done amazing work. They've produced hundreds of poems, photographs, videos that have been activated locally and nationally and internationally. And the question we have now is, what does it look like to make this work accessible across the world? Is it a creative library that focuses on the creativity of refugee youth? Is it something else? Is it the time to publish a directory, of immigrant work? It is the time, but also there are new considerations around safety and other things. So I think it's an open question for us, but I think for a long time, we tried to do both the activation and the production and the audience piece, and I think it's difficult to do both at the same time really well. And it's a question of resources and capacity too. So I think it's a very, very important one, and it comes down to the goal. Are you trying to change someone's mind? Are you trying to give someone the tools so that they can go out there and change the minds of other people? I think it's a case by case.
This is going to be our last question, and I just want to prep any of you out here in our live audience and those of you watching on YouTube to get ready to ask your questions. And I'm going to ask you maybe to be quick with this just in the interest of time, even though it's a big question. So, we've been talking largely about a kind of here and now audience and the value that our storytelling might have to the present day audience, but we know from our own experience that legacies reverberate, storytelling reverberates well into the future. So I wonder how you think about, and Ahmed, we'll stick with you and then let others weigh in. I wonder how you think about the value of the storytelling that you facilitate among the refugee youth or people in general to a future generation that may be around, long after we're gone, and how they'll consume these stories and the legacies.
Yeah, I think that both in terms of you can't plan around that long term necessarily. I think if it's a byproduct that happens over time, that's great. For us, we have these 87 fellows that we've worked with over the last decade, and they each have their own individual stories and communities, and they're based locally and beyond. And the question for us is, how do we support them to become leaders? Yeah. And if we do our jobs really well, then they can be, again, not just ambassadors for the work, but they can keep asking these difficult questions and creating the infrastructure that tries to answer them. And the future audience is an important one, and maybe that's where the archive comes in. And that this is, I think, a big value about this, and something I'm so proud of our program is that we've had fellows from the same family. We have one family, we have, I think, 4 or 5 fellows, and every year it's someone new. And funny enough, every poem that year is about their mom. It's a very great mom. It's really, really beautiful. So I think part of it is the logistical question of how can you make this work accessible digitally and physically, but also how do you invest in the leadership capacity of folks so that they can carry the work forward.
Julian or Janina? future generations, how they think about legacy?
I know for me, in developing the show and the work that I've done, one of the biggest things that I've learned is that I can be my authentic self in science. That was something I've never seen. That is something I rarely see. And the way that we think about it on the show is how can we make science culturally attuned? How can the next generation not be turned away from science just because of the communication and vocabulary or the fact that it's in English? How can we make it more accessible? And so I hope that the new generation can think about, well, my goal, what I think is one of the things that can happen is that this new generation can be able to be their authentic selves and bring in culture into science, and that's the thing that we're trying to do. One little story I'll tell, when we were developing the show, I got an email from a professor who was teaching evolution and ecology at a state prison in Illinois, and she said, hey, I found your show. I never knew what In Those Genes mean, which is actually an ode to an R&B song that wasn't about Genes, but it was an ode to an R&B song. When people don't know it, I'm like, okay, you either didn't listen to R&B or you're not a millennial. And so, but she told me she learned about the title and what it meant through her students who were inmates at the time who couldn't actually listen to the podcast. They had to read the script. But what she told me that she had never seen them so excited to see themselves represented in science. And most of them, you know, dislike science. So I see like that's the promise of the future, being able to be your authentic self.
I feel like the brevity thing was probably directed at me, so I'll keep it short.
No, it wasn't.
You know, in my work, I try to work from the premise that indigenous peoples have something unique to offer the world. The entire project of colonization was, of course, based on the idea that our people were savage, backwards, and needed to die off, and that was progress. And I think it's only right for me to be part of the project of saying that exactly the opposite of that is true. And I think that there's a lot of ways in which indigenous peoples have much to offer to a world with some big questions hanging over it. Environmental questions. You know, I'm a writer. The big thing in publishing is the transition to orality. Our cultures are oral. You know, there's a world out there that's searching for meaning. Our people know how to make meaning. There's a world out there where people are struggling to find connection. You know, I got like hundreds of cousins across the West Coast in the province of British Columbia. And, you know, that last one, I guess I'll end on because, you know, next month I'm actually going to become a dad. So, you know, the way in which this manifests in my own life is like, what is my responsibility, not just like, you know, as a talking head on a stage or whatever, to pass these things on, but like literally, how can I, through fatherhood, you know, carry these things forward?
Thank you for that. Let's turn it over to the audience for some questions.
Yes, so we have a very active chat room, and we've received some questions. If anyone would like to ask a question, please come right here, and I'd be happy to have you join the conversation in person. Julian mentioned the America 250 anniversary. Could the anniversary offer opportunities for constructive and challenging American storytelling?
I think I might be the only person who watched the entirety of Ken Burns' The American Revolution. If anybody else in here watched the whole thing, raise your hand. Oh, there's one. We got one other. We'll talk after the show. Yeah, you know, I think that what the legacy of freedom and revolution are in America could still be very, you know, powerful things for the right political and cultural forces. Just doesn't seem to be that the power and the culture are moving in that direction.
Emma or Janina, do you want to add to that?
Repeat the question one more time.
Oh, I will. What are the stories you hope to see Americans tell and hear at celebrations of the 250th anniversary of American independence?
The truth. No, but yeah, the truth, but also stories of freedom and continued freedom. I think there is this idea that we are free, and I don't find that to be true.
Yeah, beautifully said.
We have a wonderful question from Kira Dominguez Hultgren, who is our commissioned artist from Chicago. and she is in our chat room at the moment, and she asks, I loved the comment about Trojan horsing your culture when it comes to cross-cultural audience. Thinking about this performance and demon buffaloing your culture, I'm wondering if you could all speak to the gains and losses of borrowing or inhabiting a speculative or mythological genealogy or history.
Can you repeat the end of that?
Yeah. I'm wondering if you could all speak to the gains and losses of borrowing or inhabiting a speculative mythological history. The gains and losses.
Wow, what a question.
Well, she's a brilliant artist.
You know, I guess I'll take a stab at this because in my work, as I mentioned, I use the epic misadventures of my first ancestor, the trickster coyote, to narrate the life of my father, myself, my grandfather, and our people, indigenous peoples writ large. I mostly only see gains from that. You know, like I think it's a powerful thing to understand yourself to be descended from the supernatural, that your culture came from that or was stolen from that, actually, as the stories usually tend to go, that we stole our culture from the gods. At least in my culture. I think that the losses, I would say are, there's a long history of ethnography, anthropology, the West, seeing those kinds of ways of understanding of self and culture and spirituality as illegitimate, as fantasy, as fairy tale. And what I would say is that, right now more and more people are joining churches. Like, I think there's actually a big movement towards questions of spirituality in society writ large. And, I think personally that the secular arts and social sciences and humanities have disregarded the power of spirituality and how significant that has been to the human experience since time immemorial at their own peril. And I think that, we should be alive to these questions. And if we're not, who will be?
The next question, and this will be our last question for the evening. Do storytellers often understand or consider whether listeners will benefit from their stories? Who bears responsibility?
Yeah, I think we started to answer this a little bit. I think the responsibility question, I think you're responsible to listen to the best of your ability. I think that is first and foremost. I think that cannot be underestimated. This ability to listen and honor and witness is something that's really, really important. I think it can be tough oftentimes to share a powerful story and then be prescriptive right after, besides just saying maybe share this with others and go from there. And so I struggle with that space of, the sharing and the prescription. I think there's a space in between I'm still trying to figure out. But I do think that the responsibility of the storyteller is to present the story in the best way that they can, and to create space that others can see themselves in it. And beyond that, who knows?
Thank you so much.
So, yeah. So it is time for us to close, and I want to thank all of you. I want to thank Ahmed, Julian, and Janina for sharing this time. I'm so grateful that we got to do this together, all of you. I want to thank Zócalo Public Square for co-presenting this program and the entire series, which is called What Can Become of Us. Creating this series with Zócalo has been amazing. We commissioned 4 original artworks, including visual art, textile, and the dance performance that you just experienced. And after unveiling these works of art, along with panel discussions at institutions across the United States, including Asheville, North Carolina, Chicago, Brooklyn, and now at Stanford, I'm honored that the works of art will call Stanford and the Institute for Advancing Just Societies home. and they will continue to live on, speaking of legacies, as an inspiration for people to think about and talk about what can become of us in a world where people are on the move. We hope you'll visit Zócalo's website to watch the other conversations in this series, learn more about other commissioned artworks, and read the wealth of interviews and essays available there. Please subscribe to Zócalo's newsletter, podcast, and social media for more great conversations. I also encourage you to subscribe to the Institute for Advancing Just Society's social media. We're on Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube, and all across all three, it's just at Stanford IAJS. Now we invite our in-person audience to continue the conversation at our reception, which should be just out in the lobby. We have light bites and live music by the Saul Sierra Quartet. Please join me once again in thanking our panel and all of you. Thank you.
And how about our moderator, too?
Yes.